This is the Definitely Uncertain podcast, brought to you by Goldrock Capital. Each week, we look at how high net worth families can improve their lives, decisions, and investments in a deeply uncertain world. We always aim to provide practical information, even if we can't offer specific investment advice. This is the Definitely Uncertain podcast, and my name is Darren Rockman, and I'm a partner at Goldrock Capital, the 21-year-old multi-family office servicing high net worth families in Israel and around the world. And today we are talking about movies and films and the role that Israel has in this industry. And to talk about that with us, my very old friend, Yaron Niski, joins us from Tel Aviv. Hi, Yaron.
Hello, Darren. Or should I say Shmuel?
Yes, I was once upon a time known as Shmuel, but yes, Yaron. I'm trying to forget that. Yaron is an award-winning Israeli producer, writer, and director with 20 years of film industry experience. His recent projects include Atlantis Rising, which he did with National Geographic and award-winning director James Cameron, and Enslaved, a documentary miniseries about the transatlantic slave trade, starring Samuel L. Jackson. So Yaron is really well positioned to talk to us about this amazing transformation that's happened with the Israeli film and TV business. So let's start with you personally. How did you get into film and TV yourself?
It's a good question. I think that if you work on television, it's only because you had to. Something burns inside you, and it's like an obsession that you must be there. You must create something. You must pour something out of you. I really tried to be a very decent man with a nice steady job, and I failed miserably. I had a job and I was really good at it, but I was miserable. And then I decided to quit everything. And initially, I became a comic writer, a screenwriter, and I wrote comedies for 15 years. And it was the only thing I could have think of doing. If I had any other real option of doing something and doing good with it, I would probably do it, because it's a very hard work to work on television.
And for those of you from Israel who watch Israeli TV, Yaron was one of the writers on Hayudim Ba'im in the early series, right? Yeah, amongst other things. Okay, so I've got to get this out the way. What's it like working with Samuel L. Jackson?
It's really nice. When you work with famous people, the very nice thing to find out is that everyone on television and movies has the same defect. I actually can speak with Samuel Jackson better than I can speak with someone who works on an accountant or something. We share the same defect, the same something is off with us, and we spoke about nice things like sci-fi and Doctor Who and Dune and stuff like that. And it was really nice. He's a nice man.
Okay. The last decade has seen, and maybe even more than a decade, has seen an explosion in the Israeli entertainment industry, both in terms of the number of series created here locally, and perhaps more importantly for the Israeli economy, what has happened to Israeli TV and movies on international markets. Homeland, Footnote, Fauda, When Heroes Fly, On the Spectrum, all of these have just been breakout successes. So how is it that we got here? How did Israel, which is not exactly known for its superstars, maybe good on the side, how does Israel go from being oranges and software to now being a sort of core player in the world of entertainment?
I would reverse the question and ask, why just now? Because if you step into a writer's room, practically everywhere in the world, you have an amazing amount of Jews. We're the majority in most of the writer's room. And in Israel, we didn't have the same effect. And now it makes sense in my eyes, what happening now. And the fact that we live in Israel, as I found out, we work harder than other places in order to survive. If you want to work on television in Israel, you have to do 3, 4, 5 different parts of jobs that in other places you would be doing the fifth, just one. You have to be a writer, a producer. You have to carry stuff. You have to know what to do with an Excel sheet. Otherwise, it's just not happening because we don't have the budgets that other places have. That you can come in as just a writer. I don't know anything about anything else. I don't care about anything.
I don't know how to make the couple.
Yeah, yeah. It's not an option in Israel.
Right.
You have to do everything. And when I started working outside 7 or 8 years ago, I was expecting to find out that I'm not as good as they are. And I was surprised to find out that I actually know more than many other people that I started meeting. And the fact that you can look at my story, the first thing I did on television is my own animation show called Merkov 22, MK22, which is still the only adult Israeli animation show, sadly. And starting on television, I didn't say, I want to be on television. I'm going to find some small part job and then climb up for 10 years. And I said, okay, I'm on television now. I'm going to come with my own show. I'm the showrunner. That's it. I came in
Right.
there weren't any other options. Somehow I managed to sell it. I was actually the creator of my first show and first job I had on television in US or Canada. In Europe, if you want to be on television, you find a small, I don't know, a part-time internship job,
Sweeping the floors somewhere in the
sweeping the
studio.
floors,
Right.
getting coffees to the writers. Hopefully, in 2 years, I'm gonna have one joke or one line
Right.
in anything,
And
and
in
then
5 years,
5
somebody
years from
might,
now,
someone might
I'm gonna
remember your
get the
name.
credit.
That's right.
Yeah, what's happening? I think the fact that Israelis found out that they can actually be as good as other people, and now we're just storming, you know, everywhere.
So I think to summarize that down, you're saying it's a combination of, a let's call it a genetic disposition to being to writing. Um, Number
Chutzpah,
one, chutzpah, Jewish chutzpah,
chutzpah. Yeah,
together with hard work and the sort of
yeah.
entrepreneurial spirit that Israelis have become famous for, which is you don't wait to climb a ladder, you just jump through the window.
You build a house and then you
Right.
jump through the window. Yes.
Right.
No, what I did is when I told other people who I work with that I had my first, even the fact that I had the courage or stupidity to pitch my own show with zero, really zero that experience on television sounds like an act of a crazy person to people who are not Israelis.
I often say about Australia that if you're entrepreneurial and you live in Sydney, so you start a business in Melbourne. Whereas if you're an entrepreneur in Israel and you live in Bat Yam, you start 3 businesses, one in Shanghai, one in New York, and one in London, right? Given the sort of transformation that's happened, how big is this industry here today? Right? Give me some proportions.
It's a hard question. It's not big yet, I think. We had amazing success. I've done the projects that I've done were not Israelis. Were actually I was cooperating with a Canadian company as the only Israeli on board who is not Canadian or an American. But
And
now I have my
usual? Is that usual?
no,
You'll find
no.
no.
Somehow everything I'm doing is I always find out later that this is not the way to do it. I was doing it all wrong, but in real time, it makes perfect sense. But then people, when I actually achieved what I wanted, people tell me, but you could, went that way,
Right.
made much more sense. And I say, no one told me. Uh, but, but now I have my own, I came back to Israel 2 years ago and started my own production company, which I'm now developing projects for Israel and for the world. And Israel, the Israeli television and the Israeli people, like the screenwriters, the producers, directors, we got a lot of respect in the U.S. and in Europe, and but we still have a very big gap of understanding what exactly are the channels looking for. We lack this understanding of the actual needs. So you have things like Fauda or Shtisel, because no one would answer you ever. We are looking for a show about Hasidic Jews speaking Yiddish. That's gonna be a success. As I did with my other projects, things like Shtisel, of course, are very successful. Much more than Fauda, by the way. Everywhere I went, people spoke about Shtisel and also Fauda. But first of all, Shtisel. We have an occasional success like the Iran big hits, but we don't have an industry yet of factories producing masses of hours and projects, worldwide distribution. This is what I'm trying to do now, creating a kind of a factory, which I met this kind of factories in Canada, in the US, in the UK, of companies that are oriented. They know what the channels are looking for.
Understand their target market.
Yes, and they're producing it exactly. It's not just a hit coming out of nowhere. It's much more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is interesting because, if we put our sort of history, historical glasses on and look back sort of 20, 25 years, that's really where the Israeli high-tech market was. There was this ongoing discussion about how great technology, great entrepreneurs, a lot of chutzpah, as you say, but a fundamental misunderstanding or lack of understanding as to what the target markets require. And over the last 5 or 10 years, as you've had more customer-facing Israeli tech companies and Israeli tech entrepreneurs who've been around now for a long time and are doing something for their third or fourth time, there's a lot better understanding. So it sounds like that the film and TV industry in Israel is where the tech industry was late 90s, early 2000s. Is that right?
Yeah, I have to agree. Now we have ICQs coming up out of nowhere, spreading everywhere, becoming big, proving that we can do it. But what's next? What are we going to do next?
Right.
We don't have the industry. So again, I'm trying to build. I'm trying to build a factory now out of Israel because I think we have the ability and we have great talents and we can make things much cheaper, much faster. And the chutzpah is very good if you can harness it, not just shoot everywhere, but know exactly what you're trying to achieve.
Okay, so it's still a startup growth phase. You've worked on, both, as you say, both international and on local productions. You started here, then went to the big wide world, now sort of come back. And you've touched on a couple of the differences, but what other differences do you see between the way things are run, whether it's in Hollywood or in Canada or in London or in the UK versus in Tel Aviv?
The basic difference is I found out that I'm an Israeli with the number of meetings that you can have in a Canadian office about something that in Israel you shout, you stick your head out and you shout, what are you saying? And they say, yes, do whatever you want. That's it. That was the process. And I made a decision.
Structured, documented decision-making process.
Yes. And I've been on meetings around, in Canada, let's say, meetings around what colors should we use in the Excel sheet. And then I think blue. I disagree. You know what? Blue might be nice, but how about red? No, I'm against red. Okay, let's think about it and discuss this next week. And I was sitting there and I was saying, are you actually discussing the color? I was just going to randomly select colors and inform everyone. And by the way, I had so many meetings. At the end, I understood that even in the Canadian companies that I work with, the only thing I could be is the crazy Israeli who says, okay, you discuss this. I'm going to grab a camera. I'm going to fly to the Caribbean. I'm going to shoot for 3 days. I'm going to fly back with the material.
Tell me what the colors are.
And it's not everyone likes it. But at the end, I think that like everything else in Israel, the lack of structure and rules could be good, could be horrible.
Why horrible? I think you've talked through some of the advantages of it, the chutzpah and getting things done quickly and working 5 jobs.
First of all, on television, I think it prevents you from achieving really big things. Like Checkpoint is a company that has everything. There is not an Israeli way of doing it. Like they actually built a company. You have to fill a form to do X,
Yeah.
and you have the vision. Everyone knows how to operate. It's not just making things as we go along. You can do this, and you can be bought, make an exit or something. But at the end, the fact that we don't have a structured industry, I think, prevents us from actually achieving really great things. And of course, people are going into productions, which my luck until this point, that every time I was really stupid about what I decided to do, somehow I managed to achieve it and didn't lose everything. But people try to do big production. The things I've done, the budget is 12, 10, $8 million. Making mistakes on those budgets could very easily make you pay for the rest of your life, your debts, or cause many companies to go bankruptcy. It's chutzpah is nice, but when people
does
start
have its, it does,
getting hurt,
yeah, sure.
and everything could have be done more structured and be okay, I think this is where it's not good.
Okay, got it. Now, your career over the last half a dozen years has been really focused on the world of documentaries. And some of the ones I mentioned before, Atlantis Rising and also Enslaved, were both in that genre. Is there international interest demand for Israeli-made documentaries? Is there a reason? Do we have a comparative advantage in that market?
I hope so. This is basically my entire business now is depending on the belief that the answer is yes. But what I've done mostly outside of Israel is slave trade or Plato and Atlantis and stuff like that. Now I'm trying to sell the world the Jewish and Israeli content that I know that everywhere I went, people spoke with me about the Bible, about King David, about Solomon, about Jerusalem. I actually spent 7 years traveling around, began that as a very secular Jew that had nothing to do with his history or little. I first of all, I also went and had a degree in ancient history and found out what the history was actually all about.
Right.
But the fact that everywhere I went, I was Jewish. First of all, I was Jewish. I was from Jerusalem, even though I told them, no, I'm actually from Pasaba. Yeah, Jerusalem. And eventually I understood that I am Jewish from the land of Israel. And everywhere I go, people are actually very interested in history and Bible. I've done a lot of archaeology shows outside of Israel. Now, what I'm developing with big channels outside of Israel are shows about biblical archaeology,
Right.
which is a favorite thing of mine. And about, it's amazing because this place, even the Homo sapiens and the Neanderthals met in Israel. Everything happened here.
Right.
The first fortified city, the first big battle, first everything happened here. You can argue because of the fact that the Bible is correct or right, or you can say that it doesn't mean that it's right. I'm still not convinced with the God factor, but you can't deny that everything started from here. I'm going now. I'm trying to explain the world that the concept of morale, like
Morality.
morality, don't kill people,
Right.
don't work until your slaves die, even the Shabbat. Uh, so many concepts that everyone are now accepting as this is how humankind always been. No, they started in Jerusalem 3,000 years ago,
Right.
by a bunch of crazy Jews on a mountain writing in books.
Nothing much has changed, right?
No, nothing. So at the end, I think the answer to your question is yes, we have a lot of content here, which is very interesting for the world. Of course, I'm also interested in doing documentaries who are not just around Israel and Jews, but I think that the fact that we don't have a company in Israel that has become the name for biblical archaeology or history is just crazy. I'm hoping that my company will become this, but we are sitting on a treasure of history. So at least on my part, the documentary part, I think, yes. I
Right.
hope.
So this is a sort of an extension of the Israeli tourist business, which is we're being able to tell our story and tell the history to a just much wider audience. So tell me what the current project you're working on. Just something that's in development that the world is yet to see.
So I have a few big biblical archaeology shows in development with channels in the US and in Europe, which I cannot specify at this
Okay.
stage, but I have two things coming right up. One is a show called Enemies, which is an Israeli show. The second season will be out, I think, in 2 months. It's basically about the enemies of Israel. Each episode is about different enemies, and we have enough enemies for 2 seasons. Fortunately,
Only 2 seasons.
the big ones, the big ones,
The big ones, right? Okay.
the really big ones. This will be out soon. And the second one is called Birth of a Conflict. And it's basically my attempt to retell the entire Jewish Arab in a different take, because the Jews and Arabs are not fighting since the days of the Bible. It's not something that we're doing for thousands of years. We actually started doing this 100 years ago exactly. And if you look what happened 100 years ago, the answer is the British stepped in, as they did in so many places. The natives have started to kill one each other, and then the British can do their divide and conquer routine, which worked very well. And then they left, and here and everywhere else for 100 years since then,
Leave them
we're still
behind.
killing each other in Africa, in the Middle East, in
India and
everywhere.
Pakistan. Yeah.
In fact, everywhere. Basically, what happened because of the 100 years, things have now been declassified just recently.
Right.
So I have secret protocols and secret documents of the British admitting in real time what they're actually doing, which is very disappointing to find out that someone created the fight you're actually.
Wow.
And I have amazing, another treasure is there was a show called Pillar of Fire in 1981,
Sure.
made by Israeli television, and basically told the Zionist story of the Jewish people. And they interviewed Arabs and Jews and British who were actually active in the days of the mandate,
Uh-huh.
the 20s and 30s and 40s. And most of what they said was left out on the edit room. And somehow we got everything, hundreds of hours of people telling what happened.
Wow.
And again, it's very disappointing to find out that everything we know and believe is completely wrong. By the way, the Jews and the Arabs, left and right, I'm not serving any narrative. I'm just serving the facts and the truth, which will be disappointing for everyone. But it's an attempt by Jews and Arabs and British to tell the story as it really happened.
Right.
And it tells the Jews as people who belong to the region. The Jews are not a European coming to steal the Arabs' land, and the Arabs are not terrorists. The Jews and the Arabs say, as if you read the papers 100 years ago, the Arabs said, yes, Jews are from the Middle East. That was a very common conception. Jews belong in the Middle East. The land of Israel is the land of the Jews. Even the Arabs 100 years ago thought that way until, again,
The British
started changing.
messed it all up. Okay. So where can you see Birth of a Conflict? When will that, where?
Birth of a Conflict is going to be distributed internationally. I don't know yet channels, but it will be out by the end of 2022. And in Israel, you can see it in Cannes, in the national broadcast, kind of hot.
Okay, fantastic. Best of luck with both of those projects and overall with all the work that you're doing. And thank you very much for being on the podcast. This has been a slightly different episode. We don't usually deal with entertainment, but this has been fantastic.
Thank you. It was actually very fun.
Okay. And thank you all for listening. And if you've got ideas or feedback, please do send us an email to podcast@goldrockcap.com. And we look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you, Yaron. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.